Welcome to Profiles in Eccentricity, a show about weirdos. With your hosts, John Fahey, Aaron Peter, and Matt Brousseau.
Hello, folks. Welcome to Profiles in Eccentricity. It's a show about weirdos, doggone it. My name, as always, is John Fahey. I'm a gorgeous man.
That's right, John, you are.
Joining me, as ever, perhaps the pinnacle of human existence, the most gorgeous man ever to have walked the face of the earth, the love of my life, Aaron Joseph Pita.
Hi, I'm Aaron. I mean, you can't really go up from that
Take
introduction
a step sideways.
Absolutely not.
Lateral move.
Lateral move.
Yeah. Apex human predator, Aaron Pita. Maybe
Sure.
it's just next time.
Yeah.
Speaking of apex alpha bull cucker of men.
Only one that I know of.
You always peter out. Like, I build you up so hard, and then when it's your turn to do Matt, you're like,
Well, he's at a place that's beyond description.
It is,
How
because,
do you-
all right, sure.
because it's on kind of like the celestial plane.
Yes, an astral. He's an astral body of a man.
Yeah,
thank
yeah.
you.
Astral with two S's.
Hey.
Yeah. He is.
See, you can't do it either.
No, he's
Fucking petering out.
he's leveling up on a spiritual level far beyond what you and I will
Right,
ever.
and he's not even at his final form yet.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah. Well,
you and
hopefully
I
not.
will be reincarnated as some kind of a
Beetle,
sick gecko, maybe.
Oh.
perhaps. But
God willing.
most likely some sort of arthropod. Maybe we'd have to hire a lawyer.
Right. Yes, definitely.
But Matt is basically Super Saiyan at this point.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, probably a dove.
You guys are too kind. You're too kind.
Yeah.
Matt Brousseau, hey.
Hi. That's me. That's too much intro. Thank you. It's great being here. I'm so excited for 50.
Episode 50.
It's been a year.
You've come a long way, baby.
All right, John.
You know?
Very good.
It's a very, very big deal.
It's a half 100.
That's a good point, Aaron.
Matt and I were talking about the weather.
It
outside.
rained here.
Yeah.
God, fucking
It rained
pandemonium.
as soon as we put the fires out, and it made me think.
So now all the mud.
It's mudsliding.
Yeah.
Right. And I thought about Pistol Pete's brother bartending there in New Orleans.
Oh, the hurricanes he's giving.
to put sandbags up to stop the mudslides when we're hiding from Charlie. Mudslides are 2 for 1.
It's kind of a happy hour. Yeah. It's not too happy.
I can fuck with that guy all day
a
long.
Vietnam vet bartender
In New
is
Orleans.
of all
What?
places.
Ridiculous.
Don't tie those beats too tight.
Ridiculous. For the 50th episode, I've said long awaited. I wanted to do. It may seem a little too mainstream. It may seem a little too boring, but
Hell of an intro, John.
but I think that there is so much to still uncover beyond the regular headline shit about perhaps the most eccentric and neurotic and paranoid and just still kind of a poignant tale of the 37th president of the United States, Richard Milhous Nixon.
Fuck him.
I don't know. I got totally engrossed in this guy's story.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I feel like everybody thinks they know something about him.
Yes.
But I go back to Aaron's great quote. I don't know shit.
Right.
Because like I have ideas. I have third-party ideas. Robin Williams doing an impression. Hunter S. Thompson, a great obituary of him, and all.
But we don't really know shit from Shinola.
Well, it's really all about the post Watergate thing and the exposures that happened of uncovering that whole scandal, and then finding out what a neurotic, paranoid scumbag that wanted to destroy his enemies he was. But this first part, we're going to do a 2-part, is really about kind of Nixon's rise to power, and there's a very American kind of like aspiration to do well and also kind of do what he perceived to be the right thing that drove him, and it also drove him kind of mad and
Sure.
Drove him to do just these horrible things later in life. But there's a lot of, optimism and really kind of belief in things turning out well and doing things for the right reason. at the first part of his life. His house was built by his father, Frank, and his mother, Hannah, was a Quaker, Hannah Milhous.
No shit.
Yes, and his father converted...
Of the oatmeal fame.
Yes. And
Barbara Bush, yeah.
His father converted from Methodist to Quaker. He was descended from Thomas Cornell, ancestor of Ezra Cornell, who was the founder of Cornell University. Jimmy Carter and Bill Gates were also descendants of the same man, believe it or not. And so he was raised Quaker, through his mother and his convert father. And that's the thing that I think people don't really pay enough attention to is that when Nixon goes against Kennedy, there's all of this shit about Kennedy being a Catholic and
having to answer to the Pope.
And the Pope is going to run the show, but Quakers to this day are still even more obscure than Mormons. You know, like it's a really different thing. And if you ever see like a Mormon church service, do you know about what goes on there? Like they
a lot of cloak and dagger shit.
No, it's kind of this weird
dressage.
It seems kind of almost like a new agey thing, but it's very old.
Right, you get your own planet when you die.
No. That's the Mormon shit, right?
Yeah, that's what you just asked.
No,
you said Mormon.
I'm sorry, Quaker.
Oh, well, they quake.
Right. So yeah, but when you go to a service, like there's this like extended period of silence, and then when you feel moved to say something, you just stand up and say it to the congregation, and then everybody kind of listens, and then you sit down again, and it's very atypical of like what Nixon passed himself off as being kind of like
buttoned up and
you're a regular everyday
right.
Protestant. It is like a stranger faith than people give it credit for.
Maybe a type of religion that doesn't drive people to crave power.
Well, it still has, it is. It's very humble in its way, but it still has some of those trappings of like uptight Christianity, where it's like no swearing, no drinking, no dancing, even.
I take it.
He has 4 brothers, no sisters: Harold, Donald, Arthur, Edward. 4 of the 5, including Richard, were named for English kings. He was named for Richard the Lionheart. It was a really tough upbringing. They were dirt poor, and Nixon told Eisenhower, "We were poor, but the glory of it was we didn't know it." In 1922, the family ranch failed, and they moved to Whittier.
Yeah.
Aaron, you're a California native.
Yes, East LA, Whittier.
You're familiar, and I mean, this is one of the most interesting things about Nixon too, is that he's a 100% authentic Westerner, Californian.
Yeah.
And as Rad pointed out to me, Radisson Zahariev, our friend, Reagan is, credited as the other Californian, but he's really born in Illinois.
Right.
But Richard Milhous Nixon is the authentic Californian president, and he's also kind of like the epitome of the conservative Archie Bunker type, which is so funny.
Right, and Reagan was that too. It's so weird that the two. I mean, at least if like the kind of staunchest modern era Republican icons.
And also, when later on, when they're running for president and everything, like Reagan is like far to the right of Nixon. Yeah, and there's 2 California guys. Like you can't even make that shit up.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's totally insane. So he had a younger brother, Arthur, that died at 7 years of age. So the family's kind of paranoid about everybody's health now. And at the age of 12, a spot was found on Dick Nixon's lungs, and he was forbidden from sports, which I think kind of like made him like kind of a sports fanatic later. It was found to be a patch of scar tissue from an earlier bout with pneumonia.
That dirt, yeah.
Yeah, and the father, Frank and Whittier, had a gas station and grocery. Richard went to East Whittier Elementary, And in 8th grade, he won his first election as 8th grade president, right?
Yeah, he sent some kids to run through some lockers, dig up some love letters.
He just had dirt on everybody, right? He had an older brother, Harold, that kind of started leading a dissolute lifestyle, they would say.
Probably dissolute?
Yeah, probably a carouser and a bit of a
rabble-rouser?
Was he dancing?
He probably was dancing, maybe even drinking too. Possibly cursing, who's to say?
Oh, my God.
So his parents believed that, Harold was, led down this horrible road by the Whittier public school system.
Your thoughts, Aaron?
Is it LAUSD? Yeah, they were probably right.
So they sent Richard to Fullerton Union High.
Fullerton is Orange County.
Right, so he would ride the bus an hour each way. And now they're not worried about the lungs anymore. So he's playing JV football. Right. He never missed practice, but he was rarely ever used in games. Total like Rudy style, just filling up everybody's water bottle and shit. And he had great success in debate. He won plenty of championships, and he took his only formal tutelage from Fullerton's head of English, this guy named H. Scheller. And Nixon later remembered Scheller's words, which were, "Remember, speaking is conversation. Don't shout at people. Talk to them. Converse with them." And Nixon stated that he tried to use that tone as much as possible. So whenever if you think about Nixon talking, it sounds like he's sitting right next to you and he's just
shooting the shit,
throwing out his ideas. And it's just that kind of thing, And it really is probably one of his greatest gifts as a politician is to sound like he doesn't know better than you. He's just hypothesizing about the way things might be.
Right, which was a staunch contrast to JFK.
Sure,
who was an Obama-like speaker.
Yeah.
He spoke presidential. Whether you can debate the merits of that manner of speaking, but they.
Right.
RFK quoting Aeschylus.
Because they were just fucking
right.
kids.
There are these things where it's like, people feel like you have to speak deliberately, like you're a leader and stuff like that. But Nixon took this other tack, which was just to be like, after careful consideration, I've thought about this and I've thought about that, and I really just think that. But it was like, it was somehow just so not condescending.
Right.
And he talks like that. In all of his life, whether it's interviews, speeches, etc., there's kind of a humility behind it all, and it really speaks to also his position in life because he grew up so poor.
Whittier.
Yeah, and so he said he basically tried to use that tone as much as possible in all of his public life thereafter. 1928, at the start of junior year, he convinced his parents to let him go back to Whittier High, and there, he suffered his first defeat for election for student body president. At this time, he would rise at 4 a.m. to drive the family truck to L.A. to buy vegetables for his father's gas station, kind of grocery store. And he would go to the markets there and bring them back to the family grocery where he would wash them and display them all. And this is all before school every day.
Jesus Christ.
Right. And
what happened to the other 4 fucking brothers?
Oh, they're all dancing.
I think they might have been dancing. Harold the dissolute.
Harold the dissolute. He was named after Harold
the dissolute king. Yeah. Harold the depraved. Harold had been diagnosed with tuberculosis the year before, and his mother took him to an Arizona hospital that kind of specialized in TB.
The dry air.
So Nixon's duties increased even more because now the mother's not there.
So neither is the sick brother.
So he's doing all of this shit before school, going to school, and he's still graduating 3rd in his class of 207. Like, he's still just killing it in school. He was offered a tuition grant for Harvard, but Harold's tuberculosis meant that Dick Nixon had to stay close to the homestead.
What, to rub Vicks Vapo rub on his fucking chest?
Well, you gotta fucking polish the peaches before Dad tells them, pumping gas or whatever.
Jesus.
There's only one left.
Yeah, so he was needed at the store, and he went to Whittier College while working with money given from his mother's father. He played for the basketball team, but wasn't big enough for football. He stayed on the team as a sub and was noted for his enthusiasm.
Huh. Student tries, effort is good.
Can you imagine later being like one of these guys on the team being like, remember that plucky little guy that was all like, way to go, fellas, he's the president
Is that
now.
Dick? Is that... I'd love to see him. I'd love to see him shoot a jump shot.
So the Whittier College had no frats, no sororities, but they did have literary societies, right?
Uh-huh.
But Nixon was snubbed by the only one for men, the Franklins, as many members were from prominent families, unlike Nixon, who was from shit people.
Yeah, there's a lot of prominent Whittier families.
Right. But you can imagine how dirt poor these people must have been.
Jesus.
So,
Yes, I remember seeing you at the Five and Dime when I purchased a head of iceberg lettuce. There was a spot on it, boy.
Yeah.
Well, did you not wake up at 4:01 in the morning?
I wake up at 6 to get the lettuce and vegetables.
So you could be at Harvard, and now you can't get into the literary society at Whittier College.
God, no wonder you had
The only one for men. No frats, none of that bullshit. You can't get into the only, extra society, right?
It was probably a frat of sorts. They'd all read poetry and slap each other in the ass.
So this really feeds into...
Hey,
nothing wrong with that.
Poetry's gay. Ass fucking is just normal frat behavior.
All of it.
Right. That's just good times.
Yeah, all of it.
It's just sensible putting your shit where it should be.
Now, poetry, that's debatable.
Right. But slam poetry is dope, right? You're slamming some guy's ass.
The slamming a guy's ass right, it is poetry.
That's meter.
So, Nixon, snubbed by the only one, in response, forms his own, right? The Orthogonian Society. He runs the society, works the store for the family. He's doing schoolwork, and he still makes time for all these other extracurricular activities. This guy is just going.
Well, it's like you've said it to me, and I don't know where you got it from, but, if you want to get something done, ask a busy person.
You said that to me.
I did?
I had never heard that before you said it to me.
Fuck, I'm so busy, I forget.
What a testament to our relationship that you think your wisdom bestowed on me was bestowed
It's actually my own wisdom.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're learning a lot here.
Wow.
And I've never heard that at all.
I'm learning from myself.
But yeah, exactly. It is true. It's like, you want something done, ask a busy person, because this guy was just,
he's doing shit.
The allotment of time is just insane, And at this point, there's nothing promised, this man. He's just doing his duty.
Right.
He's just taking care of the family. There's no, later...
Light at the end of the tunnel.
There's no later on you can go to Harvard. There's nobody promising him anything.
He's giving up his best, the most promising option he had.
Right.
He couldn't do.
And that was from, grandfather money, even, was just going to this college where he's even looked down upon, right? So this really kind of, all of this upbringing really kind of gives you a glimpse into the mind of Nixon as, when he becomes the staunch conservative. All of these guys now that we think of as the big Republicans, they're all rich guys, and they all grow up rich, you got to think about Nixon's conviction as a conservative coming from nothing, right? And of course he still has white privilege and things like that. And, but he really was coming from a place of, there's not really any avenues. There's certainly not much given to him.
Yeah.
Everything he's doing, he's working for himself. So it really makes you understand how he really believes in that picking yourself up from your bootstraps.
If I can do it, you can do it. Right.
If you just try it, all that kind of shit. And especially this is, the 20s now into the 30s.
Well, if there is any person who can have kind of a proof is in the pudding conservative mindset, it is him.
Right, it is.
See, I worked my way up with the car. I woke up at 4 in the morning and I washed fucking onions. They had a lot of dirt on them, and then you just got to shine them off, and then you go back to school, and then you take care of your sick brother, and then you go.
Right, exactly.
It's a little more inspiring than my money shielded me from my drinking.
Yeah,
right.
and it's also the kind of thing where his principles are led a lot by this kind of older American thinking of doing the right thing because of perhaps
duty.
Yeah, and maybe your religion comes into it and all that kind of thing. But it really shows you when he goes off the rails later that he's so secure in everything he does because from his position he's doing everything for the absolute right reason.
Right.
There's no like nepotism or corruption at this time. He's coming from the totally honest place, so it's easy to see how he gets so corrupt later.
Right, because you buy your own bullshit, and you start thinking that the ends justify the means, and that's where it gets dangerous because the road to hell is paved with washed iceberg lettuce.
Right. What's the 4 a.m. vegetable run? Right. 46.
Right.
No, so when he's doing all these things, all these extracurricular activities, and he's taking care of the store and doing all this shit, and he's just becoming known generally as a hard worker to everyone. Like he's really building his reputation, just as a guy that fucking gets shit done. And he's also still becoming a champion debater. He gets better and better at debate. Right. In 1933, he became engaged to the police chief's daughter. 1933.
Give me what
junior year was 28, so he's like 22
His
now?
junior year of high school or junior year of college is 1928?
High school.
Yeah, I believe that was.
So he's going to high school in the Depression.
Yeah.
So that's why he's waking up at 4 in the morning. He's got to go.
That's why all that dirt's in his lungs.
Well, yeah, and that's why you got to go get the 4 heads of lettuce that exist in the state.
Right.
If you cut them up right, it looks like 8.
So he's engaged to this police chief's daughter,
That's rough, man.
And it's again, he's just proving himself in Whittier as this kind of like, who's a good dude is that Dick Nixon.
Yeah.
So Ola Welch is the girl. They break up in 1935 after graduation from the Whittier College in 1934.
Did they get married or they were just engaged?
They were just engaged.
So they got good for him.
He gets a full scholarship to Duke Law. Right?
After Whittier.
And it's a new school, and they sought basically like these kind of characters, the top students from all these things, people that were go-getters, and they got professors with national, international reputations that were hired, and scholarships became more competitive because suddenly Duke is shaping up to be a really good school. But Nixon kept his. He never lost it, right? He still stayed at the top of the competition for a scholarship. Because it was like suddenly it was getting flooded, and he kept his scholarship. He became by election president of the Duke Bar Association. He was inducted to the Order of the Coif, which is perhaps a hair thing.
Oh, the
coif, like a Morrissey deal.
Yeah,
right.
Yes,
that's why he met Nixon later, or Elvis later.
The slight curl in his locks there. It was a little dandy-ish.
Yes, it is.
And again, in June 1937, he graduated third in his class, third once again for some reason, and he was hoping to join the FBI. Right?
Oh Christ!
Yeah. So this is
of course,
classic Hoover FBI.
And this is a recently formed FBI. Yeah. This is a nascent FBI.
Yes. And I mean, it's so crazy to think about when you think about his relationship later with Hoover. And he received no response to his application. And so he found out years and years later that he had been accepted, but the job had been rescinded. That he applied for or whatever.
They got rid of the position.
Yes. So it was due to budget cuts or whatever because, like you said, it was a brand new organization.
Right. So he got accepted for the job, but then they got rid
He never heard anything back.
Right.
But he found out later. He was probably like, "Hey, why the fuck didn't I?"
Well, we outsourced it to China.
Right.
Look at all this.
So he goes back to California and he passed the bar in 1937 and he began practicing with the firm Winger and Bewley in Whittier on commercial litigation for petroleum companies that operated locally and other corporate areas as well as like working on people's wills.
Right.
Later on, Nixon would kind of brag about how he was proud to be the only modern president that worked as a practicing lawyer. He was like the only one that wasn't like, kind of like a lawyer on, constitutional shit. He was like a lawyer that you fucking...
law. Yeah.
Right,
But also, at that time, working with oil companies, I mean, that's a pretty good place.
Especially in L.A. in the 30s and 40s.
Sure, yeah.
There was a huge oil boom here.
A lot of wet palms.
I really like this detail.
Wet with oil.
He was reluctant to work divorces because he disliked frank sexual talk from women.
Wait, what? It's that Quaker.
Of course he does.
So
this woman starts talking about
she can't get off, and she had to get rid of the fella.
Start shaking.
So I didn't like all this frank sexual talk. Like, what were these women going in and saying?
Well, they were probably saying, "I'm not happy."
Yeah.
It's like,
he doesn't fuck me right, Dick. Yeah. Jesus Christ.
Is that Dick me or Dick me?
So he opens his own branch of the firm. Of course, excelling in law in 1938.
Just men's divorces.
And he makes partner the next year. In January 1938, he was cast in the Whittier Community Players production of The Dark Tower.
So he's acting?
Well,
it is L.A. Law is just a side gig.
So he's doing this Dark Tower play opposite a high school teacher, Thelma Pat Ryan. Right?
Wait, the Dark Tower?
No, not Idris Elba shit. Like
not Stephen King.
Oh, okay.
Right, yeah. But no, it was later made into a movie with I think like Edward G. Robinson or something like that.
The guy hosted 8 Turner Classic Movies.
He can do many things,
Edward G. Robinson.
It sounds like it.
Yeah,
he's an actor.
We'll just talk about what you know him from. How does that sound?
Fuck you guys.
So Thelma Pat Ryan was Nixon said it was love at first sight with this girl in the Whittier Community Players doing the Dark Tower. And Pat did not return the affection. And she turned him down many times. And
one of those.
Our staunchest supporter, Laura Crawford, was telling me, you'll enjoy this, Aaron, because you're a bit of a cuck.
A bit?
Yeah.
Fuck, you just cucked me on being a cuck.
Nixon, while, being turned down by Pat, would drive her to other dates with other men.
What a piece of shit. Oh, man.
They're like, well, I hope you have a nice time tonight.
If he does anything, if he has any frank sexual talk, just call me and we can talk about it, and I'll give him a good talking to.
If you need a ride later.
Can't work your bits or flick your bean or something, perhaps old Dick could help you out.
I'll let him call you Pat.
So he's driving her to all these dates. She's getting plowed down like a fucking lunatic. Presumably.
Okay.
Presumably.
Watch the Frank talk. Watch the Frank talk.
Alpha bulls like Matt here.
Take it easy. Imagine
the Whittier football team, the guys that play.
Let's not talk about sex with Nixon. All right?
Guys that actually play the game.
They're as enthusiastic about plowing down Pat, as he was about giving them water or whatever.
Is that the water boy?
But so he keeps it up, and he's driving her around. She's getting fucking turned out, whatever. He's picking her up.
Try not to drip on the seats, honey. Who knows where those fellas have been?
Isn't there those one
bench seats? So they make a left turn and it slide into his thigh. Jesus Christ, Thelma, I'm getting half of Whittier's cum on my right thigh.
They should invent seatbelts.
Pat, you're walking with a bit of a limp there. Get in the truck. I have to be in L.A. for the market at 4 a.m.
I'm glad you called me. I was up anyways.
So she eventually takes him up on it, but once they begin dating, he's like immediately proposing to her, right?
I guess we're both up early polishing cucumbers.
Oh, this one's a pickle.
This one's a pickle.
Wow, this one's an eggplant.
I call it a dickle. So she won't marry him, right? She's like, we got to go out. But I think he's engaged before Ola Welch. You know what I mean? And there's a small town, Whittier, right? And you're thinking there's Ola Welch over there. She's getting put down too. And so put down like a dog. And so she won't. She will not. Accept his offer of marriage for 2 years of dating.
Even though she's a lowly, desperate actress,
high school teacher.
Actress.
She's in the community players, but I mean,
she's
it's
a high
like
school
fucking
teacher.
waiting for Guffman. Like, it's not as if she's going to take off.
Waiting for Godot, but yeah. And he's a practicing lawyer.
He is.
High-powered attorney.
Yeah. Well, he's,
oil men.
Sure.
But he is also a piece of shit.
So eventually, he wears her down or whatever.
Where's her patience then?
And they get married in 1940 in a small ceremony. You don't want to tell everybody you're fucking getting married to this gremlin man.
Who used to drive you around to get plowed out.
Yeah.
Wait, the chauffeur?
And
driving you out to South Central.
Later on, they would have 2 children, 2 girls.
Those white people back in South Central.
Trisha would be born in 1946, Julie in 1948.
So they got to it.
But no, that was but before this, the war hits, right? Because they get married in 1940, and the Nixons moved to D.C. He's applied for the Office of Price Administration, right? We're all doing the war, and we got to do the rationing.
Oh, right, butter and aluminum,
and he's doing tire rationing, you know.
Oh,
you can't just have any old tire.
We need tires for these Jeeps.
So he's real fickle with the tires, you know, and
stingy.
Rubber's a good.
He hates it, you know. He's like, this sucks, and he leaves for the Navy now, and he could have had exemption as a Quaker, you know,
for religious.
Absolutely,
conscience?
Yeah, he could have been a conscientious objector and received it. But
not Muhammad Ali.
But I think he was kind of known as a do-gooder kind of guy, and he was given some kind of good office type job, and he said no. He's like, I want sea duty. He's like, I want to see the action and stuff like that, you know. He gets a job there, you know, supporting logistics, and it's still kind of office work, but he's on a fucking boat, and he's organizing the manifests of like the C-7 planes and everything that's going to be landing and organizing cargo, yeah. And he gets a commendation ribbon for efficient performance of duty as officer in charge of South Pacific Combat Air Transport Command.
Enthusiasm is good.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Logistics.
And he's later transferred back to the Alameda Naval Air Station. Transferred again to the Bureau of Aeronautics in 1945 because now the war's winding down, and he's closing out war contracts, all the shit they've been buying that we don't need anymore.
And that's back in L.A.
Yeah, he's back here now, right?
Yeah. That was a big part of like L.A.'s boom was the war.
Yeah, I really didn't know until I moved here how much of the military-industrial complex is in a city like L.A.
It was. I mean...
Yeah, but you still see it when you come off LAX, like, you know,
Hughes
JPL
and Raytheon and all that shit. But I mean, that it has since kind of dwindled down. But
it was coastal and,
Edwards Air Force Base is out here and all that stuff. But
right, you got all the people here to work it and shit.
But I don't know the exact number, but I believe that the population doubled or tripled after the war.
Yeah.
Here?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
I mean, all these people are stationed here, and they're like, oh, yeah, I can...
Well, you could buy a house.
Right, and you can
real estate
take it from...
speculation.
Right, now you've taken in a little bit of surfing and shit. Like, I'm going to stick around this place.
But I mean, also, it's like the Japanese were taken out, right?
Sure.
All these white people come in.
Right.
There was what, the Zoot Suit riot.
Yeah.
And there's all these...
Yes. Throw back a bottle of beer.
Yeah, I'm... Yes, John.
You talking about the cherry poppin' daddies or what?
Yeah, I know you are.
Cherry poppin' daddies right here.
Hey, whoa.
Ooh. Maybe you, bro. So yeah, he gets more commendations, and this is one of those things where it's like, you kind of wonder about even the military in like the sense of, did he get commendations later because they knew he was kind of a rising political star? Like, does the Army kind of play along with that? That was something I wondered about while doing this research. Do they kind of know these guys that are going to be somebody and be like, that guy could do with a few more medals for his, kind of pedigree as a politician later on.
That's interesting. Well, I mean,
but he's such a hard worker, too. I'm not besmirching him anything, but...
It's kind of like,
but he's really doing... And he's doing it well, but he's basically doing desk work,
that's interesting.
But it was something I wondered because he gets more commendations towards the end, and he stays on in the Navy Reserve until technically 1966. I mean, this is long after he ran for president the first time, and he retired as a commander. I think in 1945 at the end of the war, he was lieutenant commander. In 1946, during the congressional elections, the Republicans in his 12th congressional district of California were looking for somebody to defeat this guy, Jerry Voorhees.
Oh, father of Jason.
No. It's spelled a little different.
Uncle?
And they've had so much, primary infighting that they formed, this committee of 100 to be like, we are going to lock down on a person and all totally get behind him because we really want to defeat this guy.
Right.
And they don't come up with anybody. And then the Whittier Bank of America branch manager nominates
Freddy Krueger
nominates Nixon. And they had served on some kind of other thing before, and he was just like, there's something about this guy. And this is one of these things, too, where you're like, the Whittier Bank of America guy is responsible for Nixon getting into fucking politics? Like, what the fuck?
I mean, I'm guessing the bank was a huge deal. There's a lot of when you run a bank in a town.
It's the Bank of America.
Well,
but like. He's kind of off doing still like all Navy shit, traveling around and stuff like that. Like this nomination is made in his absence. It's not as if he's sitting there next to him. Like he's out of sight, out of mind, and this guy's still like who.
And he never declared like I'd like to do this.
Not at all.
Wow. Well,
he talks to Nixon about it, and Nixon speaks with Pat, his wife, about it, and they talk really kind of excitedly about it, and then he accepts. And he goes against Voorhees, and he plays up that Voorhees was nominated by, now we're talking, it's 46, right? So the next big thing is the Reds and the commies. Yeah. And some commie organization endorsed Voorhees, and Nixon played that up to the hilt. Yeah. And he beats the shit out of him, right? He beats him by 15,000 votes. And this guy was like unbeatable before,
right.
But it's this first thing where you see like how Nixon gets campaigning, where he's kind of doing some stuff where it's like, well, this is just some group that endorsed this guy. It doesn't mean that guy
speaks for them.
Is a communist. Right. Yeah, like it's ridiculous, But it was very also of the time. It was the kind of things that you would bring up.
Debate. You take every advantage you can.
Yep.
He wins by 15,000. He's now in Congress. He supports the Taft-Hartley Act, and that's very House of Un-American Activities type shit. It's about supervising the activities of unions, being like, hey, you guys communists, come on, let's talk here, and he's on the Herder Committee, right, which is a post-war committee that is basically about dealing with Europe after the war. And he's the youngest on it, and he's the only person from, the western part of America. And it leads to Congress approving the Marshall Plan, basically. That's what comes out of that. And so he's involved in that. He's involved in the House on Un-American Activities in February 47. He sponsors the Munt-Nixon bill, which, kind of brings him, to prominence.
His name's on a bill.
His name's on the bill, which requires registration of any Communist Party members, right? Yeah. It required statements of sources from any commie front media outlets,
which was all of them, in their eyes.
Anyone you didn't agree with.
Anything you think is a commie media outlet now has to, provide all this bullshit. It's just basically harassment and taking names. Yeah. And it's so funny to me that, this shit was going on immediately after the Holocaust. Where it's like...
making lists?
Making lists of people.
That's kind of like the abused always replicates the pattern of the abuser.
Right.
And to be fair, the Soviet menace or communism was a big deal.
Right, absolutely. But and there is this thing that you don't want to admit is kind of a good thing at the time, but
we need to unite against the external tormentor.
Mm-hmm. No, what I was going to say is the kind of people that would be checking that power by Nixon would actually be the far right of his party. The people that were still isolationists and stuff like that.
Right, yeah.
The people that end up being the militia people and the thing of listen, nothing matters with the Constitution.
America first.
Freedom of speech no matter what. You don't have to check sources. There is that libertarian element that is at the far right of his party, right?
Right.
And he's elected in 46 at the same time JFK is.
To Massachusetts.
Yeah. Yeah, also in the House, right? Mm-hmm. And
who was also a legit World War II hero.
Mm-hmm. Also in the Navy.
Right.
And they become friends.
But a pilot, right?
No, he
he was
it's like a transport boat or something.
Seaman. Also a seaman.
Yes.
They're two seamen.
Yes, two seamen swimming together. Uh-huh. And JFK was actually, really just as terrified of communism as Nixon, and he ran in that election as a quote fighting conservative. He was kind of to the right of his left at the time, right, which would be far more kind of New Deal Democrats and stuff like that. And Nixon was more to the center on the other side, being against all these isolationist Republicans. So there's this weird kinship that starts between these two guys.
Yeah, their Venn diagram kind of overlapped it.
Yeah, and in a very interesting way. So then he gets his other big break in the House, again with the House on Un-American Activities, with breaking the Alger Hiss case. Alger Hiss was this guy that was charged with bringing secrets to the Soviets by this guy, Whittaker Chambers. And, he strenuously denied it. And Whittaker Chambers basically convinced Nixon that this guy was a spy, and they prosecuted him. And during the trial, Whittaker Chambers actually produced evidence that both of them divulged some secrets. And so both of them kind of got in trouble, even though Whittaker had said, I never did that.
I didn't do shit.
And it led to Alger Hiss being convicted of lying under oath, and as well as Whittaker Chambers, but Whittaker Chambers was a cooperating witness, so he did no time.
There's not a lot of takey-backsies.
Yeah. Right. So Alger Hiss did 3.5 years of a 10-year sentence, but
game theory, man. That's game theory at its the prisoner's dilemma.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
But snitch on your friend and you get to go.
This guy was early State Department. Alger Hiss. A lot of people thought he was early part of forming the United Nations. A lot of people thought this was a patriot really done wrong. But some historians in later years say that he was probably a Soviet cooperator. So Nixon just doubles down.
Well, who do you know at that point? Sorry, at that point, if you're, let's just say you're him, and I don't know the ins and outs of the story, but
nobody really does.
You don't. If you're him at that point, you don't know who's going to be the world player. You got to kind of hedge your bets, right?
What, Nixon?
No, this Alger Hiss character.
Oh, sure,
right?
Yeah.
Maybe if you're the type of character that's going to be instrumental in orchestrating the United Nations or a League of Nations or whatever's going on.
Right.
Maybe you are talking to the Soviets at the same time because, who knows? They might be the superpower in 5 years.
Sure, yeah. Well, you've just seen, the last couple of years not knowing who the fuck was going to come out on top. So
or if anybody's going to.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the formation of the United Nations, it's the big powers are Russia and England and the United States.
Yeah, so you kind of have to be talking to them.
And so in theory, they're supposed to be all working together, but as soon as the war ends, then it's...
See you later.
Right. So these are the kind of things in the House that really boost Nixon's profile. I mean, this act that he did, the Munt-Nixon Act, it passed 319 to 58.
That's patriotism, baby.
It was defeated in the Senate, right?
Wow, okay.
Thank God. Wait, what?
So then he starts, throwing around the idea of doing the Senate, right? And this guy, Sheridan Downey, is having a deal fighting off this woman, Helen Douglas, right? And Helen Douglas is kind of like the Hollywood liberal type, and Nixon is he wants to get in the thick of it with these two, and Downey bows out, right? Because it's just too contentious. So Helen Douglas is the nominee, right? And
Senate.
For Senate. And it's crazy to think about this woman running for Senate in fucking 1950, but
because that was before women knew how to do stuff?
Well, it's just it's crazy just to think that there was somebody that was going to be a senator that was a woman in 1950, but then she's also this LA caricature of the early Hollywood liberal sort of.
Right.
And
it's post-war, so when it's post-war, the game has changed, right?
Sure,
oh wow, women can do shit. And it's California, and we're trying to show that we're more enlightened than the rest.
But she's pretty far to the left, even in her own party. So Nixon, he starts kind of doing the same shit where he's basically lining her up as a commie, and
he's red baiting.
He's got a pink sheet for everybody to do all this shit that links her to communism,
right?
And he trounces her by fucking 20% or something like that, And during that campaign, the shit he did led to him being called Tricky Dick for the first time. And,
no shit.
And that shit stuck forever
because he played hardball. He red tubed her.
Yeah, I mean, there is this thing where it's maybe to him, all these people were communists, but do I really believe that he believed it? I don't know.
I mean, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't really matter.
I mean, in his mind, it doesn't matter whether she is or not. He's doing what he has to do to win.
Yeah, but I think that he actually does.
You think he believed it?
I think he thought that it was just
close enough,
a stepping stone away.
Right. To be fair, I think a lot of people at that time had an earnest, however misguided it was.
Oh, yeah.
I think a lot of people did have an earnest fear of...
Yeah.
I mean, they killed 20 million people in Russia.
Sure, yeah.
Of their own people.
And they do a really good job in the J. Edgar movie of showing how he becomes such a staunch anti-communist, because it shows his early law enforcement days are going into anarchist bombing things.
Right.
So it's showing you this thing of like these people really feared this, you know.
Yeah.
But also at the same time, you forget that JFK was just as fearful of it. Like these guys were both centrist, you know, congressmen at the same time that were like, I mean, JFK was distancing himself from the New Deal. You know, like
because of how
leftist it was.
Or even, I mean, you could even call it fascist.
Right. Well, he was saying like it was all about rights and not responsibility. That was actually his own words. Whereas like about like you're entitled to this instead of being like, you know, ask not what your country can do for you. That's so emblematic of him being really kind of a centrist, you know?
Yeah, and I wonder how much of that is playing to the wind and how much isn't.
Right.
But I mean, Nixon, through all of these things we're hearing, every single story is Nixon doing whatever he needs to do. He's doing whatever he needs to do to keep his family together.
Right.
That's going at 4 a.m. He does, in order to marry Pat, he does every single thing. And
I'll drive you to get fucked by all these colored fellas. I don't care.
He does whatever he needs to do.
It's horrible, sorry.
And colored fellas.
Well, it's because in the time it was taboo, and I feel like...
Yeah, she had to sow some oats.
It's historically accurate.
It makes it seem...
hotter.
For me, yes. Absolutely.
For me too.
I love it. But for him, it must have been horrible because he was a racist.
Yeah.
Which we can talk about in part 2.
Yeah.
But again, he's doing whatever he needs to do
to get the job done.
Maybe it isn't that horrible because in his mind, the ends are justifying the means.
Very Machiavellian.
I do truly believe that he always felt like he was doing the right thing. And it's
right for him.
Because even the bad guy thinks they're the good guy.
But so I'll kind of get more into that. Like you see more and more of that as it continues. But so he does these things, and I mean, I really honestly believe that he might have thought that this woman was like a secret communist. So he's now he's in the Senate, and he keeps friendly but distant from Joe McCarthy because the whole Red Scare thing is still continuing. But you can kind of smell that it's not going to go that well.
Probably a little crazy.
He's keeping distance in the Senate from Joe McCarthy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And his voting record is very, very interesting as a senator because he's voting for statehood for Alaska and Hawaii, right?
This is when there are 48 stars in the flag.
Right. He's voting in favor of civil rights for minorities. He's supporting federal disaster relief for India and Yugoslavia as like a very kind of like international approach.
So India is going through their independence, right? From the British Empire at that point,
right?
And Yugoslavia. Is this the stuff with fucking Mo Berg going on at that point?
It would be
like the 40s.
This would be kind of like early 50s.
Yeah, that might be the Mo Berg skydiving into Yugoslavia.
Right. So,
okay.
But now, are these things that as California's representative, was he echoing
his
the
constituency
of the constituency?
I mean, Nixon was well. First of all, California is also secretively like very conservative.
Yes,
right. The state legislature has always been very Republican and stuff like that, and people forget about it. That it's just like these couple of patches that are very
right. As the population increased toward the cities, it became a very left-leaning state, but geographically, it's red.
Mm-hmm. Right. Sure. Yeah.
But San Francisco, San Diego, Los Angeles, it's blue.
There's still enough of conservative stuff going on here to totally support what he's doing. And also, he's a centrist, right? Like, it's, he's kind of really doing what he actually thinks is best on...
Right, he's voting along his conscience, not party lines.
He's still voting against benefits for illegal immigrants, right? And, against price controls. Like, remember, he's been the fucking oil guy lawyer and shit like that.
And he's been the tire price fixer.
Right. So then he's suddenly, like... thrown in amongst the list of names to be vice president for Eisenhower running, right?
In 1950, yeah.
I mean, I guess it kind of makes sense because suddenly there's power in the West,
right?
And and you're trying to drag a constituency across all over the country.
Yeah, totally. It's it's a brand new thing, and those guys would the Democrats were always like, I need a north-south guy, and Republicans at that time were more like, we need an east-west guy,
right?
Country and western,
rhythm and blues.
You're right. So
both.
So I'm sorry, it's 1952 that Eisenhower is elected by the Republicans, and he really didn't have like any preference for a VP, but Republican people basically got together in like sounds like a total conspiracy theory thing, like a smoke-filled room.
But it probably was, because everybody smoked inside.
Yeah. And the name that comes out is Richard Nixon. I mean, like he's a kid too. He's 39.
Jesus.
I think he's the second youngest VP ever. When they got into office, he was 40.
Imagine going for the youth vote with Nixon.
And it's about California because of the political base there for Republicans, but it's also his stance against communism. How like notable he is in
his war record.
Yeah, and.
His polishing produce record.
He's just seen as a vote winner. He is this bootstraps guy. He is that era of what the Republicans would claim to be. Of like this guy worked real hard, tried his best, and now, by golly, he's going to be the vice president.
Well, as you can see over the past, I don't know, let's say 4 elections, you can see that your VP pick can make or break your national election hopes.
Yeah, it says everything about your judgment.
And it's kind of like your. It's your appeal to the rest of the base, right? Trump picks Pence, and all of a sudden, and Clinton picked the other guy who nobody gave a shit about. And
Gore?
No,
Hillary. Tim Kaine.
Hillary picked Tim. Tim who? Exactly, right? But Trump picked Pence and appeals to the conservative base, right? And then you have. In every other simulation, John McCain beats Barack Obama.
Right,
but he picks fucking Sarah Palin.
Yeah.
And just nosedives, right? So it's a weird strategic pick. It's a weird strategic choice. Although it's ceremonial position, it's symbolic, but it does.
It kind of changes here because, Eisenhower is, this former general and with Nixon, he kind of really initiates what Nixon's biographer later said was the first modern vice presidency. Like, Nixon is the one going on the attack on the campaign trail, while Eisenhower talks about his vision for the country, right? So that's just in campaigning, right?
I guess he's kind of the perfect pick because you don't want Eisenhower to be an aggressor. He's supposed to bring everybody together.
Right. Sure,
He's the general of the entire country.
Right.
And so you have this plucky guy going, being the barnstormer and being the aggro man. Right,
and a testament to the innocence of the times, seemingly. This is innocence of the times after they dropped nuclear bombs, of
course.
The Republican ticket...
on the people that they put in camps.
In September... a couple of months before the election, right? They had a huge crisis. There was the media reported that Nixon had a political fund that was maintained by his backers, which reimbursed him for political expenses.
Some campaign finance.
They're paid for his dinners?
And it was not illegal, but it exposed Nixon to allegations of possible conflict of interest, which is just the way it is now, right?
Right. They paid for dinners?
Yeah. And
was there corn?
So
did he polish it?
Based on just that, there was pressure on Eisenhower to drop Nixon from the ticket. And Nixon, still a senator at the time, goes on TV. And he delivers an address to the nation, which it was heard by about 60 million Americans. And
at that point, there were probably 150?
Probably about there, yeah. And it's the largest television audience up to that point.
I mean,
60 million.
Before the Super
Bowl. Right? Perfect medium, like the perfect timing with the perfect medium.
Yes.
And Nixon goes about it in kind of this politically brilliant way where he's like emotionally saying, defending himself that the fund isn't secret. There's no donors receiving any special favors. And he said he's a man of modest means and that his wife had no mink coat. And instead she wore a quote.
That is a knock on Stalin, right?
Or even Lenin, I think.
Wow.
Yeah. He goes, she had a, quote, respectable Republican cloth coat. It's just made of simple cloth, right?
Wool.
And he says he's a patriot. And,
she was cold a lot.
Yeah. And it's remembered as the Checkers speech because Nixon said he had received one gift, which was a little Cocker Spaniel dog sent all the way from Texas, and our little girl, Trisha, the 6-year-old, named it Checkers.
It's like this. It's
huge public outpouring of sympathy for Nixon.
The dog is a master stroke.
Yeah.
What are you going to get mad about a puppy?
Are we going to kill the dog now?
Do you want me to kill the dog? Does that make you feel
one thing I won't give back, and the 6-year-old, she loves it.
And that's
I'd strangle it with my bare hands.
If you wanted me to, but it really upset my daughter, and I don't think you'd want to do that.
So that's they sail to re-election. He's kept on the ticket, no problem.
That's brilliant.
Political masterstroke, you know.
The dog is wow.
And so yeah, it's
and they don't talk about the 3 dogs he killed. But,
No,
they talk about the one.
he
Chess and Othello were murdered. Checkers they kept. Yeah.
It's
Black Dog.
Nixon has more responsibilities as VP. This is also what makes him the most modern
Very Cheney-like,
vice president. Right? He's given specific critical tasks by the president to carry out, and also kind of like the cheerleader enthusiasm again, like the football thing of implementing the president's initiatives and going around and doing stuff on his behalf. And there's like this big collaboration between the two of them that had not existed before. The VP was very, very nominal, and this was like, you know, now if Eisenhower isn't there, Nixon chairs the cabinet meetings.
Right.
Nixon chairs the National Security Council meetings.
Wow.
Like this guy is like deep in it.
Proto Cheney.
Super deep in it, but he's also. He's like, and he says this later in his life. He's like, I came from this thing. You know, Eisenhower was a general, and I was, his, subservient, and I carried it out that way. I never, and he did. He would never try to throw Eisenhower under the bus, even when later on during re-election, people around Eisenhower were like, maybe during re-election we'll do somebody else on the ticket, and stuff like that. But when Eisenhower had a heart attack and stuff like that, it was totally just Nixon just filled in right away. And he would come out and he would reassure the public that everything was fine and everything was going to be okay. And he still didn't do any like ambitious kind of Game of Thrones-y, power grabby moves. And he made sure other people didn't. That was like the real loyalty thing that he exhibited. He was just like, I know my role and this is what I do. And I can't fuck with Eisenhower. He'd probably strangle me to death like I'd strangle that dog. You know what I mean? Like it's like he wasn't doing it. It was very, very dutiful.
In fact, he calls me Checkers.
Like
but it's perfect time and place where the general, not a politician in charge, a general is who doesn't want to deal with the generic politician stuff.
Right.
So here's the guy who's
perfect
the perfect
politician.
But this post-war,
and also a perfect, like you said, almost a perfect soldier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He understood his role. Like, I'm your subordinate. I follow your orders, sir.
Yes, completely.
And I'll make sure nobody else steps out of line, and I'm not going to step out of my role. And
he's not going to upstage Eisenhower,
the guy who won the war.
Yeah.
Right, but also, like, keep in mind, like, Eisenhower's out of commission for 6 weeks.
Yikes.
He had a heart attack.
Yeah.
Nixon is the president.
Yeah.
Like, and, at this time, there was also none of that.
He's the hand of the king.
Vice president takes over rule type shit. Like
there was no rules of succession at that point? Like,
well, it wasn't like immediately like the VP fills in when the
president is indisposed.
Incapacitated, etc. Yeah.
Names in a hat.
All that stuff.
Draw straws, play checkers, strangle.
But, I mean, mainly making sure that the cabinet officers didn't do their own power grab is one of the most impressive things about him.
Because there could have been a coup.
Right, and he's just like, it's going to be fucking chaos, And his biographer, Stephen Ambrose, said he earned the high praise he received for his conduct during the crisis. He made absolutely no attempt to seize power. So Nixon wants to be in on the ticket for a second time. Eisenhower's aides are like, nah, this fucking guy, whatever. Like, Nixon has always had a little bit of inherent dislikability, Yeah. There's been always something that rubs people the wrong way about him. Yeah. In one way or another, he kind of gets things done, but he's a little bit of a chip on his shoulder kind of guy. And
I mean, the guy who purposely cucks himself.
But he's also, he's not really,
likable,
or even maybe as like, he's not going to go along with something he doesn't believe in either. Like he's kind of going to be a little bit of a pain in the ass,
I bet if he was better looking.
Sure.
You think so?
No, but that's definitely...
Or is that your solution to everything? Just be hot?
Works for me. I don't understand why more people don't try it. Well, I mean, that's why, that debate that he had with Kennedy.
Right.
If the people that listen on the radio said Nixon won. The people that watched on TV said that JFK won.
Right.
And, I think this is actually not an I think. We are hardwired to like people who are better looking.
Sure, yeah.
And I bet if he was better looking, people would have probably liked him more. But he looks kind of squirrely.
Yeah.
He's Tricky Dick. He looks like a tricky dick.
He already had the nickname by then, too.
So Eisenhower's kind of getting looked at to be like, hey, who are you going to run with again for 56 and stuff like that? And he's like, well, I'm not going to say anything until I'm renominated or whatever. It's like, you're the president. You know you're running again, you know. And then in the New Hampshire primary, Dick Nixon gets a ton of write-in votes. And immediately he's back on the ticket.
Right.
Right? So
why because New Hampshire's first? Second?
It's the first primary, right? You know, the first one is Iowa caucus, whatever.
Well, is that even back then Iowa was first?
I don't know if it was. I mean, New Hampshire's the first primary.
Same thing. New Hampshire is the first primary,
and it's full of a lot of dog killers, so they sympathize with him.
They hate checkers.
Come at me, New Hampshire.
So he goes comfortably into re-election in 1956, and he goes on a major foreign policy trip to Africa, right, in 1957.
I remember this in high school.
And he comes back, and he immediately helps shepherd the Civil Rights Act of 1957, right? And keep in mind, he's already been voting for civil rights legislation before then, which is something you don't really think about when you think about Nixon, you know? But he definitely understood how important this was.
Well, it's something that we don't think about in our generation, period, at all.
Right. But
we take it for granted across the board.
But you also forget
in our parents' lifetime, it was a real fucking thing.
Yeah, and you also forget how many fucking Democrats were against it back then.
Yeah.
You know, the Democrats were filled with racists, you know, all the old Dixiecrats and stuff like that. So it was centrist guys in the Republican Party that helped get a lot of that legislation passed under, you know, LBJ, Kennedy, et cetera, like everything.
LBJ, too, weird.
Weird?
Yeah, he's a maniac.
Yeah. Yeah,
so
well, that's for another tricky day.
Maniac, sorry.
Yeah, he is a maniac. Another time, though. Yeah. So Nixon was really advising him to sign this civil rights thing, Eisenhower, and Eisenhower did. Eisenhower has a mild stroke in 57. Nixon, again, gives a press conference reassuring everybody everything's cool, it's all good, right? Then Richard and Pat Nixon go on a goodwill tour in 58 of South America, and everything's cool. And then they get to Lima, Peru, and student demonstrations, right? And Nixon just is like going to the campus to speak or whatever, and he gets out of his car to confront these students, and they all start pelting him with shit.
Produce of all things. These are fine tomatoes.
Don't throw the tomatoes.
These are unpolished.
At his hotel, more people spitting on him and shit like that. In Caracas, Venezuela, Nixon and Pat are attacked again, spat on by anti-American demonstrators, and their limousine was attacked, and everybody was so in awe of how courageous he was at these mobs that wanted to kill him that even like his hardest enemies were like
in the U.S.
Yeah, were like, man, fucking Richard Nixon is like really the real deal.
Wow.
And Nixon was like, all of those people there were paid by the Communist Party to demonstrate against us. Even when the head of the CIA was like, no, dude, that's totally not true.
We paid them.
Yeah, these people genuinely hate us.
That's the early Soros money.
You know, totally ridiculous. But yeah, so he keeps earning all this respect, like as he goes further and further, despite kind of all these setbacks and his own insecurity, you know,
or perhaps because of the setbacks.
Yeah, I mean, but there's all this grudging respect, and
he's got a poor kid mentality. So that can get you far, especially back then.
With all of the height of the Cold War, it's crazy to imagine that there was a Soviet American like cultural kind of agreement that the Soviets would come over here and they would open up an exhibit about Soviet Russian life, and that we would do the same in Moscow with
what?
Yeah, basically we would go to each other and we would show each other how each other were living in 1959.
What agreement was this? This is I know nothing.
You've never heard about this?
No.
This is one of Nixon's most famous moments.
It sounds like a lie.
No, it's entirely true. The American National Exhibition is the one that was in Moscow, and that was held after they did the Soviet exhibit in New York in June 59, immediately after July 59 in Moscow, the American National Exhibit. It's under the Soviet Cultural Agreement, and it was, I never heard much about the Soviet one in New York.
Right.
But the one in Moscow was like loaded with all the newest shit from Sears, right? We go over there and we're like rubbing their nose in it.
There's ovens, there's all these,
And Nixon's walking around over there in all these like cutaway kitchens with Nikita Khrushchev. And Eisenhower's little brother Milton, like, yeah. Right?
Milton.
Yeah, my brother can't make it. It's hot.
He had a heart attack and then a stroke.
Couple times.
Everything's fine. Dick's got it.
Anyway, check out this mixer.
It's
and so there's all this bullshit, and as they're going around it, it's all being filmed, and Nikita Khrushchev is like, well, you're making inventions for the now. We Soviets are making, advancements for the future generations, like you're making all this shit to make life convenient for yourself now. And it's this very diplomatic debate between Soviet communism and American capitalism that is held by future President Nixon and current Premier Nikita Khrushchev. And it was called, in one cutaway, there was an impromptu, debate about the difference of lifestyle, and it was called the kitchen debate. And this was all filmed. And Khrushchev was like, you have to put this debate on air in America with subtitles in English showing what I'm saying. And Nixon's like, you have to show it in Russia with Russian subtitles of everything I'm saying. And they shook our hands. Yeah, we shook our hands and we made a man's bargain, and they were totally down with it. Later on, the Soviets were like, we can't let this get out.
Those microwaves are pretty good.
yeah. So they were trying to censor it and stuff like that. And but it was a huge moment for Nixon.
Fuck, man, I totally blanked on that.
It's crazy to think that there was
that they
this
even allowed that to happen.
Extremely civilized debate between two people that were pointing guns at each other's heads and just being like,
big nuclear guns.
Which one of us is actually better for the people?
Or the world. That is the world at a crossroads at that point.
Yeah.
Right? Together or at least they both defeated fascism or the Nazis, right? And the world was kind of at a crossroads.
Yeah.
And there was a choice you could make. Do you want to go for this so-called utopia, or do you want to go for this kind of free-range, weird Wild West capitalist shit?
Right.
You pick, and then we'll show each other the other people's goods, and then what? Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I cannot believe that happened.
Yeah, it's incredible. And the thing that's so crazy about it was they were saying, here's a house full of devices that the average American can afford.
Might get, or you can definitely get a sack of potatoes every month.
But you know what I mean? And there's one of these things where I want to be like, why isn't there a kitchen debate between the former America and the current America? Because none of these things are things that the average American can afford.
What, food?
Yeah, just like everybody's
a home.
Yeah, below the poverty line. Everybody could get a fucking house and all this bullshit in it back then, and it's we've fallen so far from this shit we were trying to rub somebody else's nose in back then.
Right. Yeah. But we don't want to look at the American past through rose-colored glasses, because then you've kind of fallen into that MAGA shit.
Right.
How great was it?
Right.
So
what Khrushchev was interesting. He was the perfect person for Nixon to deal with, because Khrushchev was
peasant.
It was a peasant.
Yeah.
They were closer to each other than Kennedy
and Khrushchev. And Khrushchev came away from this with a lot of respect for Nixon. He was like, this guy really believes his shit. He's a man of strong will.
They were both poor kids that ended up fucking rising to run their countries.
So Khrushchev is saying all this shit where he's like, you're doing all this shit from the now. He's like, you've been around for 150 whatever years. He's like, we've been around for 40 something. He's like, we're gonna surpass you by far, and then be like, bye-bye. He said bye-bye, right?
Who said bye-bye?
Khrushchev. He's like, we're going to be like, bye-bye, we're going to surpass you.
He said bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Nice.
Yeah. And then he asked, do you guys have a machine that chews the food and pushes it down into your stomach?
That is such a hard cucking.
So good. He's like, it chops the food up. Oh, you know what we do? Chop the food up.
And you know what? He was right about the future.
I mean, yeah.
Because now
give
we
me
have
convenience or give me death.
Put the spinach and the acai into a blender. You mix it into a
you
sludge.
pay someone to chew it for you and spit it into your mouth.
Put it into my mouth, and I don't have to chew it.
So this was the crazy thing about this debate is that during the whole thing, the VP and the premier of the USSR never discuss territory, nukes, anything on that level. Just whose society benefits people more.
That's brilliant.
At such a politically hot time, it's completely insane.
This is the beginning of the Cold War, though, right? Right as what you would call the Cold War begins. Maybe this is why it starts.
Sure, yeah. But I mean, by the time Kennedy's running for president in 1960 against Nixon, he's running on the platform that, the Soviets have bypassed you. America is losing now.
Right,
Kennedy was running on a very, communist-fearing platform against Eisenhower and Nixon.
Right.
Which is crazy to think about.
That's interesting, because they had nukes at this point.
Sure, yeah.
They had just got them.
Yeah, I think they had, yeah.
Yeah. It was the first high-level meeting between Soviet and U.S. leaders since the Geneva Summit in 1955. There was, then Nixon is of course going to be the nominee for president against JFK, and we're really out of time here. I just really
we're not. Keep going.
I just want to go into, some of the stuff that really blew me away. About these two guys, Kennedy and Nixon, that were these centrists that were like completely from two different levels. They were both Navy guys, sure, but Nixon was so poor, and then
and Kennedy so rich.
Yeah, and they were going to debate as freshman congressmen in 1947 the Taft-Hartley Act, which was the one about the unions and supervising them and stuff like that. And the college that had them was asked to pick the two kind of brightest, most promising new congressmen. And they picked the two guys that would later become president. And these guys went to this college and
this was before any sort of nomination process had happened.
This is 1947.
What college?
And these guys go and they debate this thing, and
they didn't shout them down or call trigger warnings.
Right. Yeah, they
wow.
They go on this debate, and they go back and forth on it, and then on the train ride back to D.C., they have to share a car, and they flip for the bottom bunk.
No fucking way.
Right, and Nixon wins the toss.
Wait, Kennedy flipped a coin, Nixon flipped a lettuce, or what?
And then it's like they don't.
Let's just share a bed.
They don't. But they don't.
That's what I want to
like
see.
who's sleeping where doesn't even matter because they stay up all night talking.
Of course they would.
They stay up all night talking because they both come from the Navy and they're both really alarmed about communism, and they share this
brilliant.
This crazy experience, and they develop this real friendship that is just unbelievable because Nixon recognizes in Kennedy that he's actually a very shy man. Like later on, and we'll get to this in episode 2, Nixon becomes this kind of presidential historian and armchair historian, and he talks about the Kennedys. He's like Teddy was the only real politician of them. He's like he was gregarious and fun and friendly. He's like Jack was actually a much more shy man. Yeah. And Nixon said he's like I could tell this. He's like we didn't have this want to act like we were best buddies, this fake camaraderie. He's like we really just approached each other as two shy men that weren't going to pretend we were best friends in this train car. And we just sat down and we really realized that we actually believed in a lot of the same things and we were worried about the same things for the country, not even for ourselves.
Right.
And when Nixon is going against Helen Douglas, Joe Kennedy also thinks that she's a communist.
Jack's dad.
And he gives Jack a check for $1,000 to personally deliver to the campaign of Richard Nixon, which Jack Kennedy does. He walks in.
So Joe Kennedy gives JFK a check for $1,000 and he says, hey, give this to Richard.
Yes. Republican Richard Nixon is given, and it's delivered personally by Jack, and he's like, this is to be used for the election.
Fight against this commie bitch.
He's like, and it's to be used on the campaign. It's the highest amount you can give.
Don't you fucking have any dinners or any fucking dogs.
Right, no checkers, right? And so people like Nixon, like even though he knows they're friends, is still startled by it, and people around are startled by it. They're like, "Can you believe this? Like this is crazy." And before Nixon, or before JFK is the nominee, he's like, they got the anybody but Kennedy committee, right? LBJ is part of it. All these people trying to get Kennedy to not be the nominee. Kennedy is telling people, he's like, if they push me out like this, I'm voting for Nixon. He's telling a bunch of people he's going to vote for Nixon. Right?
Oh, what a great finger on the button move.
Respects the living shit out of him. When Nixon becomes the VP, Kennedy writes him a note saying, I always knew you'd rise to the top, but I had no idea it would be so fast. Right? And then in 1956, Kennedy's going through all these spinal operations.
Right, because he's got Morfan syndrome. He's got a bunch of like genetic issues. He's not a healthy guy.
Yeah, and that was used against him in the campaign by all the people that wanted anybody but Kennedy.
Very, very Hillary Clinton like.
Right, and it was used by
sick. She's low energy.
It was used by LBJ, which Robert Kennedy never forgave him for.
Right.
He was just like leaking my brother's medical shit. But while he's out of commission in the Senate, JFK's aide was like, Richard Nixon, God bless him, came by all the time to be like, how's Jack? How's Jack?
Wow.
And people close to Nixon were like, I've never seen a man so emotional about his friend being sick. They were like, he was on the verge of tears.
Wow.
Like constantly being like, poor Jack, poor Jack, poor Jack, you know? And it was this genuine thing because, you know, don't forget, like he has an elitist, you know, entitled person, but like when he talked to him in this train car, he really figured out like, oh, you figured out shit on your own. Like you're not just taking your dad's line. You're not just a rich kid.
Yeah.
Like you've actually been in the world and you've seen things and you have your own opinions. Right. They really respected the shit out of each other. After JFK delivers the Ich bin ein Berliner speech, you know, Nixon's on vacation in Rome, and JFK calls him. He's like, I heard you were in Europe, and I'm in Europe, and I just wanted to say hello. You know, they were like really, really kind of close friends in this way that's totally bizarre for two very shy men.
Yeah,
I mean, extremely shy. Like JFK
would go on to be president.
Yeah, and JFK was extremely shy, and you know, Nixon was so shy, and people closest to Nixon were like, they're like, I don't really know him. You know, Nixon would say, I don't understand this thing of, you know, people that have to spill their whole guts about every way they feel. They'll be like, man, I got to tell you, I couldn't sleep last night. He's like, I don't do that. You know, and it's like this stiff upper lip thing from like, you know, the British king part of his family or whatever.
Richard the Lionheart.
That's like, you know, but he still is able to like forge this very strong friendship with this guy that he ends up detesting because of losing to him in politics, you know. But even after Kennedy wins, he still extends the hand of friendship to Nixon. And even after Nixon wins and JFK's dead, he still has Jackie and the kids come to the White House to visit. And he writes Jackie this beautiful, heartfelt note after the assassination of JFK. And Jackie Kennedy writes him back and is just like, think about you two guys being these brand new freshman congressmen. And, you know, she's like, you're probably going to go to the top like you thought, you know?
Wow. And he did.
Yeah, it's just fucking mind blowing. It's such a beautiful part of like their history that I had no idea existed.
I've never
I
heard
can't
that.
wait to hear more. About it.
It touched me so much. Like they were really
best of enemies, best of friends.
Yeah, but even then, like Nixon was a little
Not
bit
even an enemy
startled by how, you know, once JFK was like, all right, you're the dude, I'm going to take you out. You know what I mean?
Right.
But
that's the same thing he would have done.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and when people would trash Nixon after Kennedy won, he would be like, no. Mind your tongue. Like, he would correct them and be like, you're not going to talk about Dick Nixon that way.
Wow.
After he won.
Wow.
He would be like Jackie Kennedy said, like, he thinks the world of you maybe more than anybody. Isn't that fucking mind-blowing?
Yeah.
It's a different time.
Yeah. It just says so much about, like...
Well, and also just the caliber of person that went for the presidency at that time.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Can't wait to hear more about it, John.
Yeah.
You will in part 2.
That was great.
All right.
Yeah.
That's great, John.
We're going to get way more into like the weird shit, the clips, the mania. But I really wanted to just kind of shine a light on like the bright part or like the hopeful part of Nixon because like there is so much potential there, you know?
Sure.
Like it's really kind of a beautiful story. But afterward it just gets weirder and weirder.
I mean, it's this was a great New Hope episode. I can't wait for
The Empire Strikes
The Empire Strikes Back. Yeah.
All right, everybody. I'm going to say goodnight. I love you. I'm John Fahey.
I'm Aaron Pita.
Pepper soap.
Good night, everybody.